Alright, so we got a 1961 Hardinge Chucker HC-R. So this is a hot rod. So I figured I'd do a little Vfd explanation on it. So it's wired up with two VFDs here. So one for the auxiliary power and one for the spindle. So you turn on these VFDs, use these controls for the coolant pump, fan motor, because there's a blower fan to cool the motor for high-speed production. And the secondary controls, well, the big one, controls the spindle entirely. So you also have high-low, forward, reverse, but there's really no need with the VFD when you can adjust the RPM. But it is handy. So VFD will give you in high a direct readout of the RPM in high. So I got that mathed out. So to show you how to turn it on with the fan and to show how everything works. So here you go. Cool, we got power. Cooling fan's on. Now this has to be on to run the automatic X and Z, the travel motor, so it runs a DC motor back there. Also all the controls up here for the auto threader. So that's on. Take this out of here. Alright, it's set to 435 RPM. So now we're moving. Turn it up. Cool. Now, engage our speed, whichever direction. So you can beat the Z, X, speed up. So, that's cool. So now it's in low gear, it pulls more amperage out of the VFD and cuts the RPM in half. So it's real easy to figure out. So, shut off the fan and take you with me. So this carrier bearing has been replaced back here. Spindle's been pulled out and greased, cleaned. So rear bearing, front bearing, preload's been adjusted. This bearing, this tapered bearing up here was replaced. It was worn out. Bearings in here for your lever, roller bearings in here for your carriage. And this is actually a wet clutch system. So it's got friction plates and Synchromax transmission oil in there. So try to look at the bed if I can. There we go. So nice clean dovetail bed on it. I mean, for its age, 61, but it's nice and smooth. So these did have a auto rack where you could rack this and change the turret, but when I got it, it was disabled. So the rack and pinion is actually in here. I don't have the parts, but I do have the gear that came out of this to move the pinion and actuate the turret. But the turret's square, got a fresh upper bearing. So each of these pots is square to the spindle and works well. Got the lock back here adjusted well, gibs are adjusted well, wipers. The only thing I don't have is an oil cup. So I just put a cap on it to oil it. It does have an oiler here, so it does work. I pulled this carriage completely apart, cleaned every single bolt, every circuit, everything. You can see we got oil running here. The bed's nice and oiled. So all original paint. I didn't want to mess with it because I like it. I like how the old guys stood here with a hand on the spindle and it wore the paint off. I like that. It's actually pretty good shape. So now we'll move on to the auto threading unit. So this did come with an automatic threading unit. And here's all the pieces. So the thread head I did completely tear apart and restore. So it's nice and clean. I can't say that it's dialed in at all, because there's a lot to it, but I do have the manual for it. So we have overarm, what is this, the guide for the upper assembly. The guide there rolls on the bearing, and all the pieces. It's complete. And here's the actual arm to engage it on the thread chaser. And we got the air supply that oils the automatic threading unit. Have not tested that, haven't tested the threading unit, so it is what it is, but it's complete. Coolant pump. Yeah, what is it? 3-phase AC. The motor back there is a DC motor. Actually drive the carriage. Now, get into here. A little bit dark. So we do have pulleys, phenolic. Was it 2 steel, 2 phenolic pulleys? Anyway, they're in pretty good shape. The rest right here. Now, in the old days before VFDs, you would have to replace these pulleys. So you replace this drive pulley and the one way back there on the motor. Now it is a 1.5 horse, 3-phase, 208 volt motor. So motor, and on the end here is actually a cooling fan. So it blows air directly through the motor to keep it cool. Now this shaft is open because this model came with a disc brake. So it is an electronic disc brake to stop it. So when you would bang between forward and reverse doing threading operations, this slows down the spindle and stops it. And that's pretty cool. So adjust your belt tension here to the motor, and these belts are new and they were a pain to replace, but Super HC power band. So it did have little single rubber bands that were worn out, but now we have Gates power bands on here that are nice and quiet. So really, that's about it. I mean, I spent months on this thing, restoring it. Really like the old thing. Got a nice stop turret. And it's not locked down. Post there. And the old Hardinge dials. well, that's about it. Kick the spindle back on. No issues. So, I want to sell the machine. I'd like to sell the VFDs with it as well, because they're already programmed and set up. Let me slow that down and stop it. That's it. So any questions, give me a shout.